Hey there, it's Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies, and I'm just recording this private video for you, my esteemed colleagues in the field, because I'm working on a new ebook called The Niching Spiral. And I wanted to share with you my kind of, excuse me, my core thesis in that ebook, because I would really love to get your thoughts and reflections on it before I publish it. And if there's any thoughts you'd like to add, I would love to credit you and thought maybe you could help me flesh out this idea. And I also thought this might be useful for you in your work. Because here's what I've seen. We all know that niching is important. We know that people struggle with it a lot. And I think we all have our different approaches to helping people with it. And I've been focusing on this so much over the past few years because I've seen the ways that people have such a hard time narrowing it down. And you know, I've spent an hour in my workshops on this, a whole morning, the first day, 2 days of my 3.5-day workshop on this, and that never seemed to be enough. I've spent 7 weeks on this, and people still not figure out their niche. And I finally realized that I think how we teach it and how we explain it, how we frame niching, has a huge amount to do with how successful people feel, how well they find their niche, and that it's important for us to acknowledge the realities on the ground with niching. And I've been realizing that some of the ways that I used to talk about niching didn't really acknowledge those realities. So here's the idea of the niching spiral. And I think one of the main problems that I know I encountered when I was teaching niching in the early days was I had a sort of linear model of niching. And it was like, okay, here you are with no niche. And here you are over here, after some short period of time, with your niche. And this is a niche you're going to have for the rest of your life. And that model doesn't seem to work. It seems to get a lot of resistance from people. I found that people would pick a niche, and they'd think that was their niche, and then they would, of course, switch it, you know, the niche switching thing. And this linear model of no niche to a niche for life in a short period of time almost never seemed to work. You know, every once in a while somebody does it, but generally it didn't work. And so that left me looking for what's a better way of describing a metaphor that is more accurate to what's really happening, and that can also help people feel more successful in their approach of figuring out their niche, and hopefully also figure it out faster and less painfully. So that led me to look at different models. And I thought about, instead of using a line, using a circle, but I think the reason I avoided using the circle is because so many of my clients feel like they're endlessly going in circles with their niche. And I realized just recently that the metaphor that I've been using, that people seem to be resonating with a lot, is this metaphor of the spiral. You know, and if right here in the center is the ideal niche of a client, the perfect place for them in the target market. In my experience, it's very rare that we see such a direct line to it. You've probably experienced the same thing. It's rare that people just jump straight there. In my experience, there's usually some steps they need to go through. And I like the spiral because people, you know, they start here and they think, okay, great, I'm going to work on my niche. And they go through a process, they try some things out, and they often find themselves back in sort of a similar place, and they're like, damn, I'm just right back where I was. But they're not. They're one step in. They're actually a little bit closer. I remember I just took my bike in to get fixed last spring, and they were fixing the tires. The tire wobbled a bit. And the name they give to fixing it so it doesn't wobble is called truing the tire. Truing it so it's you know, spinning without wobbling. And I think of it with niching in a similar way. This process isn't about choosing a niche and it didn't work, choose a different niche, you know, that doesn't work, choose another one. We're truing it. Every time we go around the spiral, we're getting closer. We're learning something if we do the process in the right way. So those are my general thoughts on the niching spiral. But there's a specific process that I've been exploring and refining over the past few years. I'm finally feeling ready to share it. And there are 7 steps in my mind that seem to help people move through this process the most easily, gracefully, with the least resistance. to long-term find their niche. So this is my theory that I would really love your feedback and your considered experience on. So I think there are a number of steps. So we start out, and step one here is really getting clear on what we want to offer. Or supporting them and getting clear on what they want to offer. I used to start thinking about, well, who's the target market? That's the place to start. But I found it's much easier when we start with just a basic level. What do you want to offer? What is it that you're doing? And I find the sort of inroad with this question is, what do you see that's missing? What do you see that you wish was happening that isn't? What's missing in the marketplace? What do you notice? Then the second question, number 2, is this question of why. And I really got this props to Michael Margolis on this one, and also Jeffrey Van Dyke, Suzanne Falter-Barnes. This question of why, of, there's something that you notice is missing, but why do you notice it's missing? And the reason that anyone notices anything is missing has to do with their story, their life. There's certain things that have sensitized them to what's happening in the world. There are things that you might notice that are missing in the world that I wouldn't even consider, I wouldn't even think about. But you notice them, and they matter to you enough that you want to do something about it. And that has to do with sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly that we experience in our life. The good things we experience, the bad things we experience. Jeffrey Van Dyke and Suzanne Falter-Barnes, we talk about this wound. Your deepest wound is your truest niche. This idea that our ideal clients are often a younger version of us. But also, it's not always just the good things we've experienced that inspired us in some way to do something, or the bad things. Sometimes it's the ugly things that we've seen in the world that just made us want to do something, even though it didn't affect us personally. But there's always some reason why. And the uncovering of this often helps refine what it is we want to do, and helps us clarify our story, which we know is so crucial in marketing. Step 3 is this question of how. How do you want to offer it? We know what you want to offer, we know why you want to offer it, but what's the way you want to offer it? What's your voice, your vibe, your perspective and point of view, your take on the situation, your philosophy, your aesthetic, your unique approach to this? How do you want to do this? Because again, there are probably certain things you notice are missing, but also even within that thing, there are things you might notice that are missing in terms of how it's done. I wish people would do yoga in this way, which is why you see so many niches in yoga. So it's not just what of yoga, but how it gets done. And so in my experience, those first 3 are really the basis of everything. Because fundamentally, anyone's ideal client, anyone's niche, has to be somebody that's into these things. If they're not into this in some way, fundamentally it's not going to be a fit. And I guess that gets to the question too in niching of I think there's sort of 2 extremes. There's the Donald Trump, sort of cynical business person where you just notice an underserved target market and you create a business around it. And then there's the Vincent van Gogh starving artist where you're creating amazing, extraordinary stuff and nobody knows about it. And I guess a lot of our work is helping people try to figure out how to mix the business and the art of it together. But there has to be something of, at least in my mind, I think it's important and useful for people to get clear on that creative process. What is it inside them? So sort of niching from the inside out, as opposed to just looking at the marketplace and then trying to figure out how we relate to that. But thinking, what do I want to give? That's an authentic expression of me. How do I want to give it? And knowing that that's the basis. Number 4 is this question of who. And this one I call this is sort of the general sense of who, and I call it the big circle. Because here's one of the things I found is when I would try to get to very specific target markets right away with my clients, you've probably had this in your workshops where you say, well, who do you want to work with? And they get all excited and they say, I want to work with people who are stressed, who are going through big transitions in their life, who are ready to take responsibility and ownership of their problems, ready to pay me the full wage. And it's like, that's great. It's not a great target market. It is good in the context of, I think a lot of us talk about as the ideal client. So I call that the big circle. Just generally, who do you want to work with? Because I found if I didn't give a space for people to say those things and have those mean something and be captured, people felt very discouraged or like they were being told that they weren't smart or good enough in the way that they were niching. So we needed to give people a space to say all those things that mattered, and just a general sense of who do you want to work with, big picture. The fifth step is then we start to get a bit more specific. Number 5 is still who, but I call it the little circles. And the little circles, it's this idea of the specific target market. So they still fit in the big circle, but 3 kind of overlapping like a Venn diagram. 3 specific target markets that you can focus on within that. And a lot of, I know you have that where it's like conscious entrepreneurs, but it's like speakers, authors, coaches, consultants. And those are actually 3 different target markets, but we kind of lump them together. They all fit in the big circle. But sometimes having the little circles, the specific target markets can be really useful in terms of coming up with advanced programs. It can be really useful in terms of the figuring out hubs and where to market to. It's often easier to figure out hubs for the little circles than the big circle. And it also helps refine the flavor, because I've seen so many cases where people have the exact same big circle, but the little circles are totally different. The specific target markets are different. So this is where we get into, I think, what we traditionally think of in terms of niching of a specific group of people with a specific group of problems, or a specific problem. And which is what I found was if I tried to jump to what in my mind is now step 5, without doing this stuff, people were resistant, it didn't work, I didn't really get their business as well. But if we have the basis of this became pretty easy to get people to commit to or do. Step 6 is the idea of developing some niche projects. Basically some experiments there's the book called Lean Startup, and it's just all about experimenting, learning really quickly, trying and testing things. And because what I found is with this model, the linear model that I used to do, the idea of a niche being permanent is just not accurate in the world. Most successful entrepreneurs I know started with thinking their niche should be one thing and it's another. My mom and her husband run a tree farm, and they they were convinced 2 of their best target markets would be garden centers and landscapers. But garden centers and landscapers already have preferred vendors, they get their trees from. And they also, the garden centers just wanted the lowest price they could get on the trees, which wasn't great for their tree farm business. And the landscapers, the people who get landscapes, just want a complete landscape. They want much bigger trees than they provide, even though the bigger trees aren't going to last as long, aren't going to be as healthy. They just want a landscape done. But what they found was the reclamation companies said, well, your trees are actually the perfect size for us. So the niche changed. What they thought it was changed, but it was as a result of doing stuff and getting out into the world. And I see there are 2 places where people get stuck in their niche. And one is they either get in their head and they just totally loop around the what, the why, the how, a general sense of who, and even the target markets, but they never do anything. They never try anything in the world. And it's not until people try something and get real feedback from the marketplace that I think they really find out. Or they just try stuff and they never do step 7 of reflection. And they never really go through these steps here. But I think this step of reflection, of like we try something and we reflect, how did that feel? What worked? What didn't work? What did I learn about myself and what I'm good at, what I'm not good at? What did I learn about the kind of people I want to work with? So crucial. So niche projects could just be things like do some market research and go talk to people in your niche, talk to hubs in the niche to see what they think would be needed, run a little workshop, run a salon in your living room, write a series of blog posts, do some videos, get feedback on things. Little experiments where you can learn from, get better, and refine your offer. It could just be, you sit down with people in your target market and say, here's what I'm thinking of offering, here's what I see the problem is, here's what I see that people are craving, here's the price point I'm thinking, what do you think? And getting real feedback. And then reflecting on it. And having that then shift all this. So what I found is if you go through all these steps, it often brings us back to here. And sometimes what we try, that the project, it's not that it's failure, but we learn something that those target markets weren't a fit. And we're back here and we're like, God, I'm so much further away. Or I'm back right where it started, and all that effort was for nothing. But it's not. Especially if we have the reflection phase in, because that's where we realize, you know what? I did take a step. I am a little bit closer to the center, and we do the spiral again, and we're here, and then we're here, and then we're here, and then eventually, we've got a niche that's going to be really sustainable over time. And I think part of the frustration, one of the things I've really learned is that we're not in control of how fast we go around this spiral. For some people, maddeningly, it's like one loop and they nail it. And I think part of that is a result of just where they're at in their life, the level of coaching they get, the quality, do they have a coach that really gets them? Sometimes it's just, happenstance. A friend happens to notice something and say, oh, sounds like you do this, and it really nails their niche. But there's so much that we just don't, we're not in control of. We don't control. And this process could take a lot of circles or very few, and I think that partly depends on how deeply people reflect and think about it and how bold their experiments are. So anyways, this is my model, this is my theory and thesis at the moment, and I would really honestly love to get your reflections on this to see what you think about it. So yeah, please drop me a line, and of course any thoughts that you have that you would like me to include in the ebook, I'd be delighted to do that and to give you props and direct people to your website for doing that. So that's it. Thanks so much, everyone. Welcome to the Niching Banana. I think you'll find it has appeal. Welcome to my new niching program. Orange, you glad I didn't call it a banana? Welcome to the Niching Octagon. This will make you stop and consider your niche. Do you believe that your niching situation is without hope? Do you believe that your niching situation is without hope? Welcome to the Niching Crucifix. This will save your niche. Welcome to the Niching Buddha. Welcome to the Niching Triangle, or as I like to call it, the Niching Do-angle. There is no try, only do. I like Yoda from Star Wars. Feeling lost with your niching? That's why I created the Niching Labyrinth program, where I will be your personal David Bowie, navigating you through the depths of the labyrinth. You start here, and then you get out there, out from the labyrinth, if you're not killed by the Niching Minotaur.